Welcome to Cultivated Live for Wednesday, August 7th, 2024. My name is Jay Rosenthal. That is Jeremy Berke. We are co-founders of Cultivated Media. I am the host of this program called Cultivated Live. We do this every day at 10 a.m. Eastern. We put out our newsletter around 7 a.m. Eastern every day. It's called Cultivated Daily. It's the best daily read in cannabis. Jeremy, you are our editor-in-chief and mostly responsible for the newsletter. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Jay. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. This week, to me, I don't know. We always feel like when we look back on the history of cannabis in the U.S., this might be a big week, like one that is worthy of highlight, or maybe it's even its own chapter. In that, one, Ohio, a major state, became adult use legal yesterday. Sales started yesterday across the state in many medical dispensaries that got a dual license. That's like part A. Part B is that Tim Walz was announced as the vice presidential candidate with Kamala Harris for the Democratic ticket. He has legalized cannabis in Minnesota and not shy about it. And that just seems like two things to happen on the same day is good fortune.
Good day for cannabis in the Midwest, for sure.
It's a good day for cannabis in the Midwest, but also good day for cannabis in the U.S., I would say. And I will also say, and I had this conversation with you yesterday as we're planning the next few weeks, there has now been silence from the DEA on following the closure of the public comment period on the notice of policy, whatever that acronym is. Like there seems to be a quiet spell on rescheduling, but it seems like things are about to get louder, both on the campaign trail, but also maybe from the DEA. Do you think we're just waiting for the inevitable to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say it's 100% inevitable, but I think we're at the 98.99% inevitable. There's always some risk priced in there. But look, I mean, a lot of experts have said, and people have told us that they don't expect there to be an ALJ hearing out of the comments they've seen. Nothing sort of rises to that level, even from, the very vocal anti-legalization group, excuse me. So I think, while it's not a done deal, signs are pointing in the direction that this will get done well before November. And I'm guessing, possibly before the end of the month, things can move pretty quickly, but, we'll see.
Yeah. And then I'll pull on my political hat. Before the end of the month, let me tell you what that actually means, because I think we had this part of the conversation yesterday too.
Yeah.
You and I privately, is that next week is, or the week of the 19th is the Democratic convention. Next week is the week of the 11th? Is that right? 12th? So we have the week of the 12th, the week of the 19th, and then the week before Labor Day. Those are the next 3 weeks. I don't think it'll happen. I don't think they will announce anything the week of the Democratic convention. That is too chock full, and that's not usually when the federal government makes decisions. If I had money to put down, and I don't, but I would put down money right before Labor Day weekend is when we'll hear a rescheduling announcement. Although, predicting what the federal government will do is always a fool's errand. But how does that sound to you?
Yeah, no, I think that timeline makes sense. Again, not a betting man, and I'm not going to bet on it, but I think that makes sense for a political timeline. There still are a lot of T's to cross and I's to dot on actually getting the rule passed. And I would also expect to see the Attorney General write some sort of memo. We're sort of calling it the Garland memo, where he outlines what Schedule 3 actually means for companies selling legal cannabis, state legal cannabis. Because it's an interesting situation, right? Like you can't have companies that are selling a Schedule 3 substance recreationally. So what this all means is going to take some disentangling. And I imagine that if there are sticking points that drag us past August, it's the DOJ trying to figure out how they're going to treat all this and what this means for the financial system, for the NASDAQ, the New York Stock Exchange, what this means for state legal cannabis. I think these questions have not yet been answered. That being said, these are answerable questions, right? They just take a little bit of elbow grease to figure out what is right and what is wrong and where the rules are going to come.
Yeah. And I don't know whether it's complicating it or putting pressure on it, is that we are in the midst of a presidential campaign. Cannabis is going to be an issue. Tim Walz was asked about it yesterday. He is an advocate, I would even say, not just okay with cannabis, but actually an advocate for it. I have some video, which I like to do, from when he signed the legalization bill in Minnesota. You want to hear it?
Let's do it.
Here we go. It's about 40 seconds.
Prohibition has not worked. We need to put things in place that are safe. And for those who make the comments, we're certainly not advocating for our children. We're trying to make sure that there is a regulatory regime put in place. There are processes put in place. There's the ability for adults to make those decisions without criminalizing them. We know what the products are that are out there, and it just makes for a smoother market. Turning your back and pretending a problem doesn't exist. And for those who bring up, what about this, what about that, all of those things are happening right now. What this is meant to do is to try and reduce those facts, to reduce those chances, and to make cannabis and adult use cannabis safe and legal in Minnesota.
Like, he could have been on this show saying those exact same things, right?
That's
Like,
pretty good.
it's pretty good. I mean,
Yeah.
he like, and that's the thing I think I do like about him, and we can talk politics for a sec, is that he's very, I mean, plain spoken, thinks as a pejorative, but he actually just called it like it is. Like, whatever you're doing now with prohibition doesn't work. Kids have access to cannabis.
Yeah.
There's unsafe cannabis, like all those things that people say we can't have legal cannabis, and here's why. He just says those things exist now. Why pretend it doesn't, right? Like, why not put a legal market in place?
Yeah, look, I mean, if the Walz pick was intended to communicate and signal to, Midwest America, Middle America, swing voters, these sort of policy priorities that Harris has and Democrats have, I mean, that was a perfect encapsulation of that. Like, he nailed it. He knows exactly how to sell skeptical folks on it. So look, I mean, I think he is a really good pick for the industry if the industry had a say in who the vice president is. All that being said, right, it's like it's rare that a vice president will actually set political priorities. The vice president, I was talking about this with my wife yesterday. It's like the vice president almost seems like, yes, it has a high national profile, but in terms of power, it's a bit of a downgrade from being the governor of Minnesota. Like, you can't really set legislation. You're sort of a figurehead. You're mostly probably, sitting in these ceremonies and events and not doing much politicking. But all that being said, right, like, and I think we put this in the newsletter this morning, the political priors of the vice president matter for what the ticket is going to campaign on. And I think cannabis being the first question Walz gets asked on CNN, huge audience, burnishing his cannabis credentials on the trail, the industry cheering it, like, all these are very good signs at the same time, despite the politicking behind it.
And this, then this is really inside cannabis baseball, is that Minnesota has been an interesting market to watch under his watch, in that they have legal cannabis beverages everywhere that are hemp derived, right? Like the THC beverages that are hemp derived, they are everywhere in Minnesota. Everybody points to Minnesota as, let's say, the THC infused beverage capital of the world. I don't expect to get questions about that on the campaign trail, but to the cannabis industry, it actually is interesting in that there is a hemp industry, there is a cannabis industry. Mm-hmm. I don't know how well they're getting along, but they are cohabitating, I guess, in Minnesota.
No, I mean, it's innovative, right? Like Minnesota had hemp infused THCA, so effectively intoxicating cannabis beverages in breweries ahead of in-store sales of regular old weed, right? Like, think about it from a New Yorker's perspective. That's a pretty innovative program, right? It shows at least a willingness to experiment and a willingness to not be so fearful, of these chemicals that they have to be so highly regulated and treated like plutonium, right? I think, that's a pretty interesting shift in the way Minnesota has gone about this. And, even to turn it back a little bit, the way Ohio has gone about this, right? Like, Ohio, for better or worse, they just said, okay, you're a medical dispensary, sign a little paperwork, and now you can be a recreational dispensary. Like, it took New York 3 years to get to that point, and that's just a very, very different way of regulating cannabis. And, I think the underlying notion is that regulators are a bit less fearful. They're a bit less fearful and a bit more willing to try things and make the market happen.
Yeah, I will just say this about Ohio. There still are some communities, some municipalities, some cities that are saying no, even though they have medical dispensaries. They're still saying no. And for those people, this is not a great week, and one that continues to be an uphill battle. And we see you in Ohio, you medical dispensaries that want to add adult use, and the cities in which you're operating will not allow you to. One quick thing that has me, and this is not necessarily about cannabis, but is about Tim Walz in particular, in that he is from Nebraska. And in Nebraska, they allocate their electors to the electoral college, independent in each of the 3 congressional districts, as opposed to the full state. There's one that sometimes is Democratic. Obama has won one of those districts, and it's not the top priority that Tim Walz was chosen for, but his Nebraska roots may come into play in this election if it is super close. There is one congressional district in Nebraska that sometimes goes Democratic and, could be the 270th or put someone over the top if you sort of were counting that way. I just wanted to say that because his Nebraska roots don't get as much acknowledgement as his Minnesota sort of homestead. But there is something interesting there. Anything else that you're watching on the cannabis news? I know it's sort of earnings week, which comes at an interesting time as well.
Yeah, earnings. I think I'd like to look at the biggest players: Curaleaf, True Leafs, GTIs of the world. GTI was profitable. I think that's pretty interesting. It's their second or third, I believe, profitable quarter in a row. So, I'd like to see, I think, if we are right and the Schedule 3 ruling comes before the end of August, this is going to be the last crop of earnings before we're in that post-Schedule 3 world, right? It's going to take a while for that money to sort of filter out to the balance sheets and to kind of see the impact of the change in regulation. But I think it's pretty interesting. And I think this will be a really interesting snapshot of the before times, and after Schedule 3 will be the after times. And so I'm interested to see how it changes. All that being said, quarterly earnings are only as interesting as they need to be for you. If you're a retail trader, they're probably very interesting. If you are probably average reader of our newsletter, they're a directional sign, but they may not be everything you base your decisions off of. But, it's worth taking a look. It's worth familiarizing yourself and seeing how they're making money and more importantly, how they're losing money.
Right. One other quick note is that I was in Florida over the weekend, and all the campaigns, there's a lot of them down in Florida in November, are all up on TV. And obviously we're watching the Olympics, and so there's a lot of Amendment 3, pro Amendment 3 campaign ads on the air. I did not see one no on Amendment 3 campaign ad, although there was some in the news. It is interesting that this is, I live in Canada, although I am an American. The ferocity with which people are already advertising on TV in early August for a November campaign is indicative of sort of the money behind those campaigns, certainly, but also the importance that Amendment 3 has for the industry, but also how it's playing in Florida right now. I didn't get a sense sort of from the people like everybody I talk to loves weed. But it is interesting to see sort of that full bore campaign happening in Florida already. And it is striking to see an ad that we talked about and put on for our audience and showed in our newsletter actually on network TV. So it's a nice bring it all together for what's happening in Florida to actually be witness to those ads on TV. And of course, that campaign got a $20 million $20 million inflow, the no on Amendment 3 from, what would you call it? He's a hedge fund guy, like a head of Citadel?
Yeah. Ken Griffin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
Oh my God. It's a good question. What do I think of Ken Griffin's $12 million investment and anti-legalization campaign? I have no idea why. I would assume, and this is pure speculation, there's no sourcing behind this, I would assume that it is a roundabout way of backing DeSantis. I think he is a new Floridian, a newish Floridian. He wants to get in the good graces of what I'm sure he believes is DeSantis's still rising political star. And this is the issue. DeSantis clearly cares about fighting. I mean, he is very apparent that he does not want legal weed. He gets out in front of an audience whenever he can and says about all the ills of legal weed. And so to get in his good graces, I assume $12 million to help this, might be a good move. That being said, I struggle to understand why Ken Griffin, someone of that, level of wealth and public name, would be so against legalization, but that's only a question he can answer, I think.
Well, if he wants to come on, we will have him on to answer that question. Any morning he wants, 10 a.m. Eastern, we will send him the link. He can join us right here on Cultivated Live. Jeremy, anything else catching your fancy this week?
I think that's it. I'm looking forward to diving into some financial statements today for earnings, and we'll keep it moving. You really know how to have a good time. I do. Yeah. Jeremy, thank you for making time this morning. That's it for today's Cultivated Live. We'll be back tomorrow, Thursday, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific, but also on our LinkedIn channels and our YouTube channels. Check them out. Subscribe to YouTube. Subscribe to our LinkedIn channel. Back with Krista Raymer tomorrow, Thursday morning. She'll be back with us from Katrina. Jeremy, thanks so much. Thanks, Jay.